She fainted while working, until the Millionaire CEO found a bruise on her neck. What he did shocked everyone. The marble floor of the executive lobby gleamed under the morning light, reflecting the crystal chandeliers overhead. Clara Dawson moved quietly across the pristine surface, her cleaning cloth making careful circles as she polished away any trace of footprints or dust. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the headquarters of Lux Group Enterprises was still mostly empty. This was Clara's favorite time of day, the quiet before the building filled with executives and assistants and the constant hum of business. She'd been working as a housekeeper here for 3 years, and she knew every corner of this building intimately, every floor that needed special care, every window that caught fingerprints easily, every hidden space that others overlooked. To most people who worked at Lux Group, Clara was invisible, just another uniform moving through the glass halls, someone who existed in the background, maintaining the perfection that allowed everyone else to focus on their important work. But Clara didn't mind being invisible. In fact, she preferred it. Being noticed meant questions. Questions meant having to explain things she didn't want to talk about. Things like why she always wore long sleeves even in summer. Things like why she flinched when someone moved too quickly near her. Things like the sadness that lived behind her gentle smile. This morning, Clara was polishing the marble near the executive elevator when her vision started to blur. She paused, blinking hard, trying to clear her sight. She hadn't eaten breakfast this morning. She couldn't remember if she'd eaten dinner last night either. Money was tight. It was always tight, and she was trying to save every dollar she could. Her secret savings account, the one her husband didn't know about, had grown to almost $3,000. Not enough yet, not nearly enough to leave and start over, but getting closer. Clara bent down to reach a scuff mark near the elevator, and the room tilted. She pressed her hand against the wall, waiting for the dizziness to pass. It didn't pass. Instead, it got worse. The marble floor seemed to move beneath her feet. The chandeliers overhead blurred into streaks of light. Clara reached for the reception desk to steady herself, but her hand missed. She felt herself falling, as if in slow motion. The last thing she heard before everything went black was the sound of the elevator doors opening. Before I continue with this story, I want you to tell me where you're watching from and what time is it. And if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss my upcoming story. When Clara regained consciousness, she was lying on the marble floor with several faces hovering above her. Security guards, the morning receptionist who'd just arrived, and Ethan Royce himself. The CEO of Lux Group Enterprises, the man whose name was on the building, the man Clara had seen dozens of times from a distance but had never actually spoken to. He was kneeling beside her, his expensive suit jacket spread beneath her head like a pillow. "Clara," he was saying, his voice calm but concerned. "Clara, can you hear me?" She blinked, confused about how he knew her name. "I'm okay," she tried to say, but her voice came out weak and shaky. "I'm sorry, I'll get up, I need to finish." "Don't move yet," Ethan interrupted gently. "The paramedics are on their way." "No," Clara said, panic rising in her chest. "No, please, I don't need paramedics, I just stood up too fast, I'm fine." She tried to sit up, and that's when it happened. Her collar shifted slightly, revealing the side of her neck. And there, visible to everyone looking down at her, was a bruise, faded to yellowish green, about a week old, in the distinctive shape of fingers. Someone had grabbed her throat. The security guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. The receptionist gasped quietly, and Ethan's expression changed from concern to something else, something harder and colder. His eyes fixed on the bruise, and Clara saw his jaw clench. She immediately pulled her collar back into place, her face flushing with shame. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "I just bumped into something. It looks worse than it is." Ethan's eyes met hers, and Clara saw something in them that made her throat tight. Not pity, not disgust, understanding. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Clara shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "Please, Mr. Royce, I'm fine. I just need to get back to work." "Clara," he said, and there was something in the way he said her name, gentle but firm, that made her want to tell him everything. But fear was stronger than want. Fear of what her husband would do if he found out she'd told anyone. Fear of losing this job, which was her only path to eventual freedom. Fear of being pitied or judged or seen as weak. "It's nothing, sir," she repeated. "I just fell." Ethan studied her face for a long moment, and Clara could see him making calculations, deciding how much to push, deciding what he could do without making things worse for her. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, but you're not going back to work today. You fainted. That's serious. I want you to see the company doctor, and then I want you to take the rest of the week off. Paid." Clara's eyes widened. "Mr. Royce, I can't afford to miss work." "Paid," he repeated firmly. "That's not negotiable. Your health comes first." The paramedics arrived then, and despite Clara's protests, they insisted on checking her vital signs and blood pressure. Everything came back normal, except that she was clearly malnourished and exhausted. They recommended she eat something and rest. Ethan listened to their assessment with a grim expression. After the paramedics left, he helped Clara to her feet, carefully, respectfully, as if she were made of glass. "My assistant will take you to see Dr. Morrison, our company physician," he said. "She'll make sure you're really okay, and then someone will drive you home." "I can take the bus," Clara started to say. "Someone will drive you home," Ethan repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He pulled out his wallet and handed Clara several bills, at least $200. "For groceries," he said simply. "And before you argue, consider it an advance on your next paycheck." Clara wanted to refuse. Pride made her want to say she didn't need his money. But the truth was, she did need it. She needed it desperately. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the bills like a lifeline. Ethan looked at her for another moment, and Clara had the strange feeling he was seeing far more than she wanted anyone to see. "Take care of yourself, Clara," he said quietly. "You deserve that." Then he walked away, and Clara was left wondering why a billionaire CEO would care about a housekeeper who'd fainted in his lobby. Later that day, after she'd been examined by the company doctor and driven home by one of Lux Group's drivers, Clara sat in her small apartment staring at the money Ethan had given her. $200. It would buy groceries for a month if she was careful. It would go into her secret account, pushing her closer to the $3,500 she'd calculated she needed to leave. First month's rent, security deposit, enough for basic necessities while she looked for another job. Freedom had a price, and she was paying it one hidden dollar at a time. Clara's apartment was small, just a studio in a building that had seen better days. But it was hers in a way that the house she'd shared with her husband had never been. This was her space, her sanctuary, the place she escaped to when work ended and before she had to go home to him. Wait, that wasn't quite right. Clara shook her head, trying to clear the confusion. This was home. The house with her husband was... She didn't know what to call it anymore. It wasn't home. It hadn't been home for a long time, but she still had to go back there eventually. She'd been staying in this apartment for 3 months now, since she'd finally worked up the courage to tell him she needed space. He'd been surprisingly agreeable about it, probably because it was easier to control her from a distance than deal with her presence. But he still called, still showed up unannounced, still made sure she knew that leaving completely would have consequences. The bruise on her neck was from his last visit 2 weeks ago. He'd been angry about something. She couldn't even remember what, and he'd grabbed her throat, squeezing just hard enough to make his point. "You think you can just leave me?" he'd hissed. "You think anyone else would want you? You're nothing without me. Remember that." Clara had nodded, unable to speak with his hand cutting off her air. When he'd finally released her, she'd collapsed on the floor, gasping. He'd stepped over her on his way out, as if she were just another obstacle in his path. That was 2 weeks ago. The bruise had faded, but the fear hadn't. Clara's phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from an unknown number. "This is Sarah, Mr. Royce's assistant. He asked me to check that you got home safely." Please confirm so I can let him know. Also, he's arranged for a week of paid leave for you. You should receive confirmation from HR shortly." Clara stared at the message in disbelief. A week of paid leave. She'd never had paid leave in her life. She worked hourly, and if she didn't work, she didn't get paid. That was how it had always been. She typed back, "I'm home safely, thank you, but the paid leave isn't necessary. I can work." The response came quickly. Mr. Royce was very clear, 1 week paid, no arguments. He said to tell you that your job will be here when you're ready to return, and your health is the priority. Enjoy the rest, Clara. You've earned it. Clara felt tears welling up for the second time that day. Why was a stranger being kinder to her than her own husband had been in years? Why did Ethan Royce, a man who had no reason to care about her, seem to see her in ways that the man who'd promised to love her forever couldn't? She didn't have answers to these questions, but she knew one thing with certainty. Something had shifted today. Ethan Royce had seen the bruise. He'd seen the fear in her eyes. And instead of looking away, instead of pretending not to notice like everyone else in her life had done, he'd looked directly at the problem. Clara wasn't sure what would come from that, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt like someone had actually seen her, really seen her, not as invisible help, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person who mattered. That feeling was both terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. What Clara didn't know was that at that exact moment, Ethan Royce was sitting in his office making phone calls. Discreet phone calls to people who owed him favors, a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases, a private investigator who could gather information without leaving a trail, a women's shelter director who could provide resources if needed. Ethan hadn't become a billionaire CEO by ignoring problems or hoping they'd resolve themselves. He'd built his success on seeing situations clearly and taking decisive action, and what he'd seen in Clara's eyes that morning had triggered something in him, something protective and fierce, something that went back to his own childhood, watching his mother suffer in silence because she didn't know how to ask for help. His mother had eventually found the courage to leave his father when Ethan was 12, but the years before that had marked him in ways he'd never fully discussed with anyone. He knew what domestic violence looked like. He knew the fear in a woman's eyes when she's trapped. He knew the shame that keeps victims silent. And he'd sworn years ago that if he ever had the power to help someone in that situation, he would. Now he had that power. More power than he'd ever imagined as a 12-year-old boy watching his mother pack their things in the middle of the night. And Clara needed help, whether she was ready to admit it or not. Ethan's assistant, Sarah, knocked on his office door. "Come in," he called, setting down his phone. Sarah entered with a tablet. "Clara confirmed she's home safely. I sent the message about the paid leave." "Good," Ethan said. "Did she object?" "She tried to," Sarah said with a slight smile. "I told her it wasn't negotiable." "Perfect. What else do we know about her situation?" Sarah hesitated. "Sir, are you sure you want to get involved in this? Personal matters with employees can be complicated." "I'm not getting involved in anything inappropriate," Ethan said firmly. "I'm ensuring that an employee who was injured is properly supported. That's exactly what a responsible employer should do." "Of course," Sarah agreed. I pulled her file. Clara Dawson, 32 years old, been with the company for 3 years. Exemplary performance reviews, never missed a day of work until today. Lives alone in an apartment in Queens, but her emergency contact is listed as her husband, David Dawson. "Husband," Ethan repeated. "So she's married but living alone." "Apparently separated based on the address," Sarah said. "Do you want me to look into it further?" Ethan thought for a moment. "No, not yet. I don't want to invade her privacy more than necessary, but keep an eye on the situation. If she comes back to work next week and there are more bruises, or if she seems frightened, I want to know immediately." "Understood," Sarah said. After she left, Ethan sat at his desk, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. His company occupied the top 15 floors of this building. From his office, he could see all the way to Central Park. He'd built this empire from nothing, starting with a single house flip when he was 23, using money he'd saved working construction jobs. Now, at 38, He owned one of the most successful luxury real estate firms in the country. He had money, power, respect, everything society said should make a person happy. But sitting in his pristine office, thinking about Clara's frightened eyes and the bruise on her neck, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, real purpose, beyond making money or closing deals. The purpose of actually helping someone who needed it. He picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "Michael," he said when his friend answered, "I need some information about domestic violence resources in New York. Specifically, what options are available for someone who needs to leave an abusive situation but doesn't have the financial means." "This for someone specific?" Michael asked. "An employee," Ethan said. "I want to be prepared in case she needs help." "Smart," Michael said. "Give me a few hours and I'll send you a comprehensive list of resources, including emergency housing, legal aid, and counseling services." "Thanks, Michael, I appreciate it." After he hung up, Ethan returned to the window. Somewhere out there, in a small apartment in Queens, Clara was probably scared and confused, wondering why her boss had helped her, wondering what would happen next. Ethan couldn't force her to accept help. He knew that much from his mother's experience. You couldn't save someone who wasn't ready to be saved, but he could make sure that when Clara was ready, when she'd gathered enough courage to take that step, she'd have resources and support waiting for her. He could remove the barriers that kept people trapped in dangerous situations, financial barriers, legal barriers, the barrier of not knowing where to turn for help. That was something concrete he could do. And Ethan Royce had always been a man of action. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls, but Ethan's mind kept drifting back to Clara, to the way she'd tried to hide the bruise, to the fear in her eyes when he'd asked who hurt her, to the desperate gratitude when he'd given her money for groceries. That last part had been the hardest to witness. $200 wasn't much to him. He spent more than that on lunch sometimes. But to Clara, it had clearly meant everything. That disparity bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The fact that he lived in such abundance while people like Clara struggled to afford food. It wasn't a new realization. Ethan had always been aware of his privilege. But somehow, putting a face and a name to that inequality made it feel more urgent. Made it feel like something he had a responsibility to address. By the end of the day, Ethan had received Michael's comprehensive list of resources. Emergency shelters with locations kept confidential. Legal aid organizations that specialized in helping domestic violence survivors. Counseling services that offered sliding scale fees. Job training programs for people trying to rebuild their lives. Financial assistance programs. Everything someone in Clara's situation might need. Ethan had Sarah compile it all into a simple, discreet document. Nothing that screamed domestic violence resources if someone else saw it. Just information that could be helpful if and when Clara needed it. He had Sarah send it to Clara's personal email address with a simple message. "Some resources you might find helpful, no pressure to use them, just know they're available if you need them. Ethan Royce." Then he went home to his penthouse apartment and tried not to think about a woman he barely knew but couldn't stop worrying about. Meanwhile, in her small studio apartment, Clara was making soup with the groceries she'd bought using Ethan's money. Real vegetables, fresh chicken, herbs and spices she couldn't usually afford. It was the first decent meal she'd made for herself in weeks. As the soup simmered, Clara opened her laptop and found the email from Sarah. She almost deleted it without opening the attachment, but curiosity won out. When she saw what it was, a carefully compiled list of resources for people in abusive relationships, Clara felt something break inside her chest. He knew. Ethan Royce, billionaire CEO, saw through her lies and knew exactly what she was dealing with. And instead of judging her or ignoring it or making it awkward, he'd simply provided information, giving her options without pressure, treating her like an adult, capable of making her own decisions, respecting her agency while offering support. Clara read through the entire document, tears streaming down her face. Emergency shelters, legal resources, counseling services, job training, financial assistance. Everything she'd been too ashamed or afraid to look for herself, all compiled in one place. At the bottom was a personal note from Ethan. Clara, I don't know your full situation, and you don't owe me any explanations. But I do know that no one deserves to be hurt or afraid. Whatever you're going through, please know that there are people and organizations ready to help when you're ready to accept it. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve a life where you feel safe. E.R. Clara read that note 5 times, memorizing every word. You're stronger than you know. You deserve a life where you feel safe. When was the last time someone had said anything like that to her? When was the last time someone had seen her as strong rather than weak? When was the last time anyone had acted like she deserved safety and respect? Clara couldn't remember. She saved the document to a folder on her laptop labeled Work Resources so it wouldn't raise suspicion if anyone looked. Then she ate her soup and thought about the fact that a man she'd never spoken to before today had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her husband had shown in years. Something was shifting inside Clara, something that had been dormant for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to live like this forever. That maybe the $3,000 she'd saved was just the beginning. That maybe there were people out there who would help her take the next steps. That maybe she could have a future that didn't include fear and pain and walking on eggshells. It was a dangerous hope. Hope could hurt worse than anything when it was disappointed. But sitting in her small apartment, eating real food, reading words that treated her like she mattered, Clara let herself feel it anyway. Let herself imagine, just for a moment, what freedom might actually look like. And for the first time in years, that future didn't seem completely impossible. The week of paid leave passed both too quickly and too slowly for Clara. Too quickly because she dreaded returning to work and facing Ethan after he'd seen her at her most vulnerable. Too slowly because being alone with her thoughts meant confronting truths she'd been avoiding for years. She spent the week reading through the resources Ethan had sent, really reading them, not just skimming, learning about the cycle of abuse and recognizing her own relationship in every description, learning about financial abuse and realizing that her husband's control over money wasn't normal or acceptable, learning about emotional abuse and understanding that the constant criticism and isolation were deliberate tactics, learning that none of it was her fault. That last part was the hardest to accept. For years, Clara had internalized her husband's words, that she was too sensitive, that she provoked his anger, that if she just tried harder, communicated better, was more understanding, things would improve. But the resources Ethan sent explained something revolutionary. Abuse wasn't about anything the victim did or didn't do. It was about the abuser's need for power and control. Nothing Clara could have done differently would have changed her husband's behavior, because the problem wasn't her. It had never been her. That realization felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after a lifetime of rain. On Thursday of her week off, Clara made a phone call that terrified her. She called one of the legal aid organizations from Ethan's list. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the phone. "My name is Clara," she said when someone answered. I think I need help." The woman on the other end was kind and patient. She asked questions without judgment. She explained options without pressure. She made Clara feel like seeking help was brave rather than shameful. By the end of the call, Clara had an appointment scheduled with a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases, pro bono, free legal representation to help her understand her rights and options. Clara hung up the phone and cried with relief and terror in equal measure. She was really doing this. She was taking steps toward leaving, toward freedom. It was the most frightening and empowering thing she'd ever done. That evening, Clara's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Clara, it's Ethan Royce. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Clara's heart jumped into her throat. "Mr. Royce, no, it's fine. Is everything okay?" "I should be asking you that," Ethan said. "I wanted to check in and see how you're doing, if you need anything, if the resources I sent were helpful." "They were," Clara said quietly. "Very helpful. I made some calls, started figuring things out." "I'm glad," Ethan said, and he sounded genuinely pleased. "That takes a lot of courage." I'm terrified, Clara admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Fear is normal, Ethan replied. You're making big decisions. Anyone would be scared. But Clara, from what I've seen of you, you're one of the strongest people I know. You don't know me, Clara said, not rudely, just factually. I know that you've been working full-time while dealing with a situation that would break most people. I know that you show up every day with kindness and professionalism, despite whatever you're going through at home. I know that you fainted from exhaustion because you were saving money instead of feeding yourself properly. That's not weakness, Clara. That's incredible strength directed towards survival. Clara felt tears welling up again. Thank you for everything. The time off, the resources, this call. You didn't have to do any of it. Yes, I did, Ethan said simply. Not because you work for me, but because it was the right thing to do. And Clara, I want you to know something. When you're ready to come back to work, your position is secure. And if you need more time, or if you need to adjust your schedule to deal with legal matters or anything else, just let Sarah know. We'll make it work. Why are you being so kind to me? Clara asked, her voice breaking. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Because when I was 12 years old, I watched my mother pack our belongings in garbage bags at 2 a.m. so we could escape my father while he was passed out drunk. She had nowhere to go and no money, but she did it anyway because staying was killing her. A neighbor took us in that night, gave us a place to stay while my mother figured things out. That neighbor probably saved our lives. He paused. I can't go back and help my mother when she needed it. I was just a kid, but I can help now when I see someone else in that situation, and I can make damn sure that if anyone who works for me needs help, they know where to find it. Clara was crying openly now. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry you're going through it now, Ethan replied, but you're going to get through it, Clara, and I'll do whatever I can to make that process easier. After they hung up, Clara sat in her apartment feeling something she hadn't felt in years, not alone. For so long she'd been isolated, cut off from friends and family by her husband's jealousy and control. She'd believed she had to handle everything by herself, but maybe that wasn't true. Maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe it was actually the strongest thing she could do. When Clara returned to work the following Monday, she was nervous about how people would treat her. Would they pity her? Would they gossip about the bruise they'd seen? Would everything be awkward and uncomfortable? But when she arrived, people were just normal. The security guards greeted her warmly, but didn't mention the incident. The receptionist smiled and asked how her week off was, without prying into why she'd needed it. Her supervisor checked in to make sure she was feeling better, but didn't ask intrusive questions. It was clear that Ethan had said something to the staff, had protected her privacy while making sure everyone knew she'd been unwell and deserved respect and space. Clara was grateful beyond words. She threw herself into her work with renewed focus. Every dollar she earned now felt like a step toward freedom. She met with the lawyer from Legal Aid that week, a woman named Rebecca, who was sharp and compassionate in equal measure. Rebecca explained Clara's options clearly and without judgment. She could file for divorce and a restraining order simultaneously. The restraining order would legally prohibit her husband from contacting her or coming near her. Violating it would result in arrest. Rebecca also explained that because Clara had been married for 7 years, she was entitled to certain assets in the divorce. Even though her husband had controlled all the money, she had legal rights to a fair division of marital assets. You're not walking away with nothing, Rebecca said firmly. You're entitled to half of what was built during your marriage, and if he tries to hide assets or threaten you, we have ways to deal with that. For the first time, Clara understood that leaving didn't mean starting completely from zero. It meant claiming what was rightfully hers and building from there. How long does the process take? Clara asked. It varies, Rebecca said, but we can file the restraining order immediately, which will create a legal barrier between you and him. The divorce will take several months to finalize, but once that restraining order is in place, you'll have legal protection right away. What if he gets angry? What if he tries to hurt me before the restraining order goes through? That's why we're going to be strategic, Rebecca said. We'll file everything at once and have you served through a third party. You won't be present when he receives the papers. And we'll make sure you have a safety plan in place. Somewhere secure to stay, people who know what's happening, emergency contacts. Clara nodded, taking in all this information. There's something else, Rebecca added. One of my colleagues specializes in getting emergency orders of protection. If you feel you're in immediate danger, we can go to court tomorrow and get a temporary order put in place within hours. It would only last until the full hearing, but it would give you immediate legal protection. I don't know if I'm in immediate danger, Clara said honestly. He hasn't contacted me in over a week, but I'm always afraid he might. That's fear based on past behavior, Rebecca said. That's a valid concern. Let's plan for worst-case scenarios so you're prepared. Better to have protection you don't need than need protection you don't have. They spent 2 hours going over every detail. Clara's hands were shaking when she left the legal aid office, but it was a different kind of shaking than before. Not fear, adrenaline, determination. She was really doing this. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara prepared methodically. She gathered important documents, birth certificate, social security card, marriage certificate, bank statements showing her husband's financial control. She photographed the bruises on her neck and arms, dated each photo, and sent copies to Rebecca. She wrote down every incident of abuse she could remember, with dates and details. She opened a new bank account at a different bank, one her husband had no connection to. She changed all her passwords and security questions. She told 2 trusted co-workers what was happening, so someone at work knew her situation. She researched short-term housing options, including the women's shelter Rebecca had recommended as a backup plan. Every step felt like taking control of her life back. One afternoon, Ethan called Clara to his office. She'd been expecting this eventually, wondering when he'd want to discuss what had happened. She took the elevator to the executive floor, her heart racing. Ethan's assistant, Sarah, greeted her warmly. "Go right in, Clara. He's expecting you." Clara knocked on Ethan's office door. "Come in," his voice called. She entered to find him standing by the window, looking out at the city. When he turned to face her, his expression was kind but serious. "Clara, thank you for coming up. Have a seat." She sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, feeling small in the enormous office. "I wanted to check in with you personally," Ethan said, sitting across from her rather than behind his desk. "See how you're really doing. And I want you to know that this conversation is completely confidential. Nothing you say leaves this room unless you want it to." "I'm doing better," Clara said honestly. "The resources you sent me, they changed everything. I have a lawyer now. I'm taking steps to leave." Ethan's face showed relief. "That's good. That's really good. Do you have a safe place to go when you leave?" "I have my apartment, and there's a women's shelter if I need it." "Your apartment that your husband knows about," Ethan said carefully. "Is that really safe?" Clara hesitated. She'd been thinking about this herself. "It's all I can afford right now," she admitted. "I'm saving money, but—" "What if I told you there's an option you haven't considered?" Ethan said. "What do you mean?" "Lux Group owns several residential properties that we keep for short-term executive housing. Fully furnished apartments that we use when bringing in consultants or executives from out of town. They're currently vacant." He leaned forward slightly. "Clara, I'm offering you the use of one of these apartments. No rent, completely secure building with 24-hour doorman and security cameras. Your husband wouldn't know the address. You could stay there while you finalize your divorce and figure out your next steps." Clara stared at him in shock. "I can't accept that. That's too much." "Why is it too much?" Ethan challenged. "We're not using the space. It's just sitting empty. Why shouldn't it be used by someone who needs safety?" "Because it's charity," Clara said. "Because I need to do this on my own. Because I can't be dependent on anyone's kindness. That's how I got trapped in the first place." "This isn't about dependence," Ethan said. "This is about having resources available while you build your independence. You'll still work, still save money, still make all your own decisions. This is just a safe space to land while you do that. And Clara, accepting help when it's offered isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Clara felt tears threatening again. "Why do you care so much? I'm just a housekeeper." "You're not just anything," Ethan said firmly. "You're a person going through a difficult situation. And I'm someone who has resources I can share. That's all this is. One person helping another because they can. He pulled out a key and a piece of paper with an address. I'm leaving this here. The apartment is available if you want it. No pressure, no strings attached, just a safe place if you need one. Clara looked at the key and felt something shift inside her. For years, she'd believed she had to handle everything alone, that asking for help was shameful, that she didn't deserve support. But maybe that was just another lie her husband had told her. Maybe accepting help from someone who genuinely wanted to give it was actually the brave thing to do. I'll think about it, Clara said quietly. That's all I ask, Ethan replied. Before she left, Clara turned back. Why did you really call me up here? Just to offer the apartment? No, Ethan admitted. I wanted to see for myself that you're okay, that you're safe, that you know you have people supporting you. You barely know me, Clara said. I know enough, Ethan replied. I know you deserve better than what you've been getting, and I know that sometimes people need to hear that from someone else before they can believe it themselves. Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As she left his office, she clutched the key and address in her hand. 2 weeks later, Clara signed divorce papers and a restraining order in Rebecca's office. Her hands shook as she signed her name, but she didn't hesitate. He'll be served tomorrow, Rebecca said, at his workplace, by a process server. You need to be somewhere safe when it happens because he'll probably try to contact you immediately. I will be, Clara said. That evening, she packed everything important from her studio apartment. Clothes, documents, laptop, a few books. Everything else could be replaced. She left her key with the building manager and took a cab to the address Ethan had given her. The building was in a good neighborhood, with a doorman who checked her ID against a list. Ms. Dawson, he said with a smile. Mr. Royce's office called ahead. Welcome. I'm James. If you need anything, just let me know. The apartment was on the 8th floor. Clara unlocked the door with trembling hands and stepped inside. It was beautiful. Hardwood floors, modern furniture, a kitchen with granite countertops, large windows overlooking the city, a bedroom with a real bed and quality linens, a bathroom with a deep tub and fluffy towels. Most importantly, it felt safe, truly safe. Clara set down her bags and walked through each room, touching surfaces, opening cabinets, making sure it was real. On the kitchen counter, she found a note in Ethan's handwriting. Clara, this space is yours for as long as you need it. The doorman has instructions not to give your address or any information about you to anyone without your explicit permission. You're safe here. Congratulations on taking this step. You're incredibly brave. ER. She read the note 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in her wallet. Evidence that this wasn't a dream, that someone believed in her enough to help her escape. That night, Clara slept better than she had in years. No jumping at every sound, no fear that her husband might show up drunk and angry, no walking on eggshells, just peace and safety and the knowledge that she'd taken the first real step toward freedom. The next day, her husband was served with divorce papers and a restraining order. As Rebecca predicted, he tried to call Clara immediately. She didn't answer. He sent texts, angry, pleading, threatening in turn. She didn't respond. He showed up at her old apartment building, only to be told by the building manager that she'd moved and left no forwarding address. He tried calling her at work. Sarah, following Ethan's instructions, told him that Clara was unavailable and that all communication should go through her lawyer. He showed up at Lux Group headquarters. Security, prepared for this possibility, informed him that he was trespassing and would be arrested if he didn't leave immediately. The restraining order meant he couldn't come within 500 feet of Clara, her workplace, or any location where she was known to frequent. Violating it would result in immediate arrest. For the first time in 7 years, Clara had legal protection from the man who'd hurt her. At work, she moved through her days with a lightness she'd forgotten was possible. Her co-workers noticed the change. "You seem different," one of the other housekeepers said. "Happier." "I am," Clara admitted. "I'm finally free." Word spread quietly through the building. Not gossip, but genuine happiness for someone who'd been suffering in silence. People started treating Clara differently, not with pity, but with respect. They saw her as someone who'd been strong enough to leave, strong enough to choose herself, strong enough to build a new life. One evening, about a month after she'd moved into the secure apartment, Clara was walking through the executive floor when she ran into Ethan. "Clara," he said with a warm smile, "how are you settling into the apartment?" "It's wonderful," she said. "More than wonderful. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied. "Just seeing you smile is thanks enough." They stood there for a moment, and Clara noticed something she hadn't before. The way Ethan looked at her wasn't with pity or charity. It was with genuine respect and something else she couldn't quite name. "Would you like to grab coffee?" Ethan asked suddenly. "I mean, if you're not busy, there's a place around the corner that makes excellent cappuccinos." Clara felt her heart flutter. "Coffee with my boss?" "Coffee with a friend," Ethan corrected. "If that's okay, no pressure." Clara thought about all the reasons she should say no. She was still technically his employee. She'd just gotten out of a terrible relationship. She wasn't ready to trust anyone yet, but looking at Ethan's kind face, remembering everything he'd done for her, she found herself saying yes. "I'd like that," she said. They went to the coffee shop, and for an hour they talked about things that had nothing to do with work or abuse or difficult situations. They talked about books and movies and their favorite places in the city. 6 months after filing for divorce, Clara sat in Rebecca's office listening to the final settlement terms. Her husband had fought everything initially: the restraining order, the divorce, the asset division. But when Rebecca presented evidence of financial abuse, evidence of physical abuse documented by photographs, and evidence of his violations of the restraining order, his lawyer had advised him to settle. "You're getting 40% of the marital assets," Rebecca explained. "That includes half the equity in the house you own together, half of his retirement accounts, and a lump sum payment for the years you were married. It comes to about $200,000. Clara stared at the number, unable to process it. $200,000. More money than she'd ever imagined having. "Is that real?" she asked. "Very real," Rebecca confirmed. "You were married for 7 years. You supported his career by managing the household. You're entitled to this. And honestly, I think we could have gotten more, but he was willing to settle quickly on this amount if you agreed to finalize everything within 30 days. "I want it done," Clara said. "I want him completely out of my life." "Then we'll accept the settlement," Rebecca said. "You'll have the money within 60 days. And Clara, this is your money, not his, not owed to anyone. Yours to do with as you choose. Make sure you spend it on building the life you deserve." After leaving Rebecca's office, Clara walked through the city in a daze. $200,000. Enough for a down payment on a small apartment. Enough to go back to school if she wanted. Enough to start a business. Enough to never feel trapped by lack of money again. For the first time in her adult life, Clara had financial security that no one could take away from her. That evening, she met Ethan for their usual coffee. "You look different," he said immediately. "Something happened." "The divorce is finalized," Clara said. "The settlement came through. I'm really free, Ethan. Legally, financially, completely free." Ethan's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's incredible. How do you feel?" "Terrified," Clara admitted, "and relieved, and excited, and about 100 other things at once." "That all sounds normal," Ethan said. "You just got your life back. That's overwhelming in the best way." "I have money now," Clara said quietly. "Real money, enough to start over properly." "What are you going to do with it?" Clara had been thinking about this question for weeks. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to be practical, save it all, invest it, make sure I'm secure forever. But another part of me wants to do something meaningful with it, something that matters." "Like what?" Clara hesitated, then decided to share something she'd been thinking about but hadn't told anyone. "When I was younger, before I got married, I wanted to study interior design. I loved the idea of creating spaces that made people feel safe and comfortable. But my husband said it was impractical, that I should focus on getting a real job instead of chasing silly dreams." She looked at Ethan. I've been thinking that maybe I could go back to school, study design properly, maybe eventually start my own business helping people create homes that feel safe, especially for people who've been through what I've been through, people who need to reclaim their space." "That sounds perfect," Ethan said. "That sounds like exactly what you should do." "Really? You don't think it's impractical?" "I think it's brilliant," Ethan said firmly. "You have experience, passion, and a unique perspective. You understand what it means to need a safe space. That's valuable. That's something you could build an entire career around." Clara felt hope blooming in her chest. "I'd have to take classes at night so I could keep working during the day. It would take a few years to get certified." "So what?" Ethan said. "The time will pass anyway. Might as well spend it building towards something you care about." Over the next few months, Clara enrolled in design courses at a local community college. She studied at night after work, absorbing everything she could learn about color theory and spatial planning and architectural styles. She discovered she had a natural talent for it. Her professors praised her work, particularly her ability to create spaces that felt both beautiful and emotionally resonant. "You have an eye for making people feel at home," one professor told her. "That's a gift." Clara also started therapy, using part of her settlement money to pay for weekly sessions with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence recovery. Therapy was hard, confronting everything she'd endured, understanding the patterns that had kept her trapped, learning to trust her own judgment again. But it was also transformative. With each session, Clara felt stronger, more confident, more like herself, or rather, like a new version of herself, someone who'd survived something terrible and come out the other side wiser and more resilient. Her friendship with Ethan continued to deepen. Their coffee meetings became dinner sometimes, casual conversations about design projects she was working on, his asking for her opinion on interior choices for some of Lux Group's properties, him offering genuine feedback and treating her ideas with respect. Clara realized slowly that what she felt for Ethan had evolved beyond friendship. She was falling for him, but the thought terrified her. What if she was just transferring dependence from one man to another? What if her judgment was still broken from years of abuse? What if she was attracted to him only because he'd helped her, and that wasn't real love? She talked about it with her therapist. "How do you know it's not just gratitude?" Clara asked. "How do I trust my own feelings after everything?" "Tell me about how you feel when you're with him," her therapist said. Clara thought about it carefully. "I feel seen, not like he's trying to save me or fix me, but like he genuinely enjoys my company. He makes me laugh. He listens when I talk about my design projects like my ideas actually matter. He challenges me when he disagrees, but never makes me feel stupid. He encourages me to be independent, to make my own choices. He never tries to control me or tell me what to do." "And how do you feel when you're not with him?" "I miss him," Clara admitted. "I find myself wanting to tell him things that happened during my day. I think about conversations we've had. I look forward to seeing him." "That doesn't sound like gratitude or dependence," her therapist observed. "That sounds like genuine affection built on friendship and mutual respect. The question is, are you ready to act on those feelings, or do you need more time?" Clara thought about that question for weeks. She was independent now. She had her own money, her own education, her own future. She didn't need Ethan for anything practical. She wanted him for something different, for companionship, for joy, for the way he made her feel like the best version of herself. One evening, after a particularly good class where she'd presented a design project that her professor called exceptional, Clara met Ethan for dinner. She was excited, practically glowing with pride. "I got an A on my project," she told him. The professor said it was one of the best student portfolios she'd seen in years. "That's amazing," Ethan said, his pride in her obvious. "Tell me everything." She described the project, a complete redesign of a small apartment to maximize space and create a sense of safety and warmth. She'd used everything she'd learned about her own need for secure, comfortable space. She'd incorporated elements that would help trauma survivors feel at home. She'd created something beautiful and functional and meaningful. "I'm so proud of you," Ethan said when she finished. "You've come so far, Clara." I couldn't have done it without you, Clara said. Yes, you could have, Ethan corrected gently. You would have found another way. You're resilient and determined. I just happened to be in a position to help make things easier. You did more than make things easier, Clara said. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me space to heal and resources to build a new life. She took a breath, gathering courage. Ethan, I need to tell you something. Okay, he said, his expression becoming serious. I'm falling in love with you, Clara said, the words coming out in a rush. I know the timing might be weird, and I know there's a power dynamic because you're my boss, and I know I'm probably supposed to wait longer after getting divorced, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. You've become the most important person in my life, and it's not because you helped me. It's because of who you are, the way you make me laugh, the way you challenge me, the way you make me feel like I can do anything. Ethan was staring at her, and Clara couldn't read his expression. Panic started to rise. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. Please forget Clara, Ethan interrupted. I'm in love with you too. She froze. What? I've been in love with you for months, Ethan admitted. Since long before I probably should have been. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to pressure you. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything. I didn't want to risk making you uncomfortable when you were still healing. You love me? Clara repeated, unable to quite believe it. I love you, Ethan confirmed. I love your strength and your kindness and your talent. I love the way you see beauty in ordinary things. I love your determination to build something meaningful from painful experiences. I love who you are, Clara. Not who you were or who you might become, but exactly who you are right now. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. I was so afraid you just saw me as someone to save. I never saw you that way, Ethan said. From the moment you fainted in that lobby, I saw someone who'd been fighting alone for too long, someone who deserved support and respect. And as I got to know you, I saw so much more. I saw someone brilliant and creative and brave, someone I wanted to spend time with, not because I felt obligated, but because I genuinely enjoyed your company. He reached across the table and took her hand. But Clara, I need you to be sure about this. I need you to be certain that what you feel is real and not just gratitude or trauma bonding or anything else. Because I don't want to be a rebound or a safe harbor. I want to be your choice, your real, genuine choice. You are, Clara said firmly. Ethan, for the first time in my adult life, I know what I want, and I want you. Not because you helped me, but because you make me happy. Because I'm a better version of myself when I'm with you. Because I choose you freely and completely. Ethan smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Then yes, let's do this. Let's see where this goes. There's just one thing, Clara said. I can't keep working for you if we're together. That's too complicated. I need to stand on my own professionally. I agree, Ethan said, but not because you're not good at your job. Because you deserve to pursue your actual passion. What if you gave your notice and focused full-time on finishing your design certification, use your settlement money to support yourself while you study, then start your business properly? Clara's eyes widened. That's terrifying. But exciting too, right? Terrifying and exciting, Clara agreed. 2 weeks later, Clara gave her notice at Lux Group. Her co-workers threw her a small party, celebrating her new path. We always knew you were destined for bigger things, one of them said. Clara hugged them, grateful for their support. She spent the next 6 months finishing her design certification with intensive focus. Without work obligations, she could dedicate herself fully to her studies. She excelled in every class. Her final portfolio project, a complete design plan for a women's shelter that would create safe, beautiful, healing spaces, earned her highest honors. You should build this, her professor said. Not as a theoretical project, but as a real thing. This is needed. The idea took root in Clara's mind. What if she could create a business designing spaces specifically for trauma survivors, helping women's shelters become places of genuine healing, helping domestic violence survivors redesign their homes to feel safe again? helping people reclaim their physical spaces the way she'd reclaimed her life. She talked about it with Ethan one evening. They were having dinner at his apartment, not the penthouse Clara had imagined, but a surprisingly cozy space filled with books and comfortable furniture. "I think I know what I want to do with my business," she said. "I want to specialize in trauma-informed design, creating spaces that help people heal." "That's perfect," Ethan said. "That's exactly what you should do." "But I don't know how to start a business. I don't know about marketing or finances or any of that practical stuff." "So you learn," Ethan said, "or you hire people who know, or you partner with someone who has business experience." He paused. "Actually, I have an idea. What if Lux Group became your first client? We could hire you to redesign some of our residential properties with trauma-informed principles. It would give you a portfolio of real work, provide steady income while you build your client base, and it would make our properties better." "You'd do that?" Clara asked. "I'd do that because it's a good business decision," Ethan corrected. "Your designs would make our properties more appealing and valuable. It's not charity, Clara. It's smart business." 6 months later, Clara's business, Haven Design, officially launched. Her first clients were Lux Group properties, just as Ethan had suggested. But word spread quickly about her unique approach. Domestic violence organizations started referring clients to her. Women's shelters hired her to redesign their spaces. Individual clients who'd experienced trauma found her through word of mouth and wanted her help reclaiming their homes. Clara's business grew steadily, built on her talent, her unique perspective, and her genuine care for the people she helped. On the 1-year anniversary of her divorce being finalized, Ethan took Clara to a special dinner, not at a fancy restaurant, but at a small community center. Clara was confused until they walked inside and she saw what he'd arranged. The room was full of people, women Clara had helped through her design work, staff from the women's shelter she'd volunteered with, her professors from design school, her therapist, Rebecca the lawyer, even some of her former co-workers from Lux Group. "What is this?" Clara asked. "This is a celebration," Ethan said, "of everything you've accomplished, everything you've built, everything you've overcome." There was a display of Clara's design work, before and after photos of spaces she'd transformed. There were testimonials from clients about how her work had helped them feel safe in their homes again. There was a cake shaped like a house with the words "Welcome Home" written on it. Clara walked through the room in a daze, overwhelmed by the evidence of her own impact. She'd helped dozens of people create spaces that felt safe and healing. She'd built a successful business doing work she loved. She'd transformed her own life completely. At the end of the evening, Ethan pulled her aside to a quiet corner. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small box. Clara's heart jumped. "Ethan?" "Before you panic, it's not an engagement ring," he said with a smile. "We both know you're not ready for that yet, and honestly, neither am I. We're still figuring this out." He opened the box to reveal a beautiful key on a delicate chain. "This is the key to the apartment you've been living in," Ethan explained. "The one Lux Group owns. I'm transferring ownership to you. It's yours now, completely yours. Not a loan, not a gift with strings. Just yours." Clara felt tears welling up. "I can't accept that. It's too much." "You can and you will," Ethan said firmly. "Clara, you've been paying rent on that apartment to Lux Group for the past 6 months since you started your business. You've paid market rate, never late, never asking for special treatment. This apartment is worth about $300,000. I'm selling it to you for the amount you've already paid in rent plus $1. "That's not fair to you," Clara protested. "Life isn't fair," Ethan said. "If it were fair, you never would have gone through what you went through. If it were fair, you would have started your design career 10 years ago instead of being held back by someone who didn't see your potential. I can't make up for lost time, but I can make sure your future is secure. So please, just accept this." Clara looked at the key, understanding what it represented. Not just a home, but true independence, true security. The final piece of building a life that was completely hers. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I accept." Ethan fastened the chain around her neck and Clara touched the key, feeling its weight against her heart. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," Ethan replied, "for trusting me, for giving me a chance, for showing me what real strength looks like." They kissed, and Clara felt something settle inside her. This was real. This was healthy. This was love built on respect and equality and genuine affection, not control or possession or obligation, just two people choosing each other freely. 2 years after that night, Clara's business had grown exponentially. She'd hired 2 assistants and was working on projects across 3 states. She'd been featured in design magazines for her innovative approach to trauma-informed spaces. She'd started a non-profit arm of her business that provided free design consultations to domestic violence shelters. She'd written a book about creating safe spaces that became a bestseller in the design community. She'd become exactly what she'd dreamed of: successful, independent, respected for her talents. And through it all, Ethan had been there, not as her rescuer or her savior, but as her partner, her equal, her choice. They'd built a relationship based on mutual respect and support. Clara supported Ethan's work, helping him remember to balance his business obsession with actual living. Ethan supported Clara's growing business, celebrating her victories and helping her navigate challenges. They traveled together, exploring new cities and finding inspiration in different architectural styles. They spent quiet evenings cooking dinner and talking about their days. They built a life together that was both independent and intertwined. One evening, while they were walking through Central Park, Ethan stopped at a bench near the lake. "This is where I used to come," he said. "After my mother left my father, she'd bring me here on Sundays and we'd sit on this exact bench and talk about the future. She'd tell me that someday we'd be safe and happy and free, and I'd believe her because I had to." He turned to Clara. "I think about that sometimes, about how my mother fought so hard to give me a better life, how she sacrificed and struggled and survived, and I think about how she'd feel knowing that I'm with someone like you, someone who has that same strength, that same determination to build something better." "I think she'd be proud of you," Clara said softly. "I think she'd be proud of both of us," Ethan replied, "for surviving, for healing, for choosing love even though we both know how much it can hurt." He pulled out a small box, and this time, Clara knew what it contained. "Clara Dawson," Ethan said, "I love you. Not because I saved you. We both know you saved yourself. Not because I feel sorry for you. I've never felt sorry for you. I love you because you're brilliant and strong and kind, because you make me laugh and challenge me and remind me what really matters, because you chose to heal instead of staying broken, because you chose to build instead of staying trapped." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me? Will you choose me, not because you need me, but because you want me? Will you build a life with me as my equal partner?" Clara looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her lowest and never made her feel small, this man who'd offered help without taking away her agency, this man who'd believed in her before she believed in herself, this man she'd chosen freely and completely because he made her life better in every way. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you, because I love you, because I choose you, because you're my partner in everything." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss. Around them, other people in the park applauded, having witnessed the proposal. Clara laughed through her tears, holding tight to this man who'd helped her remember that love didn't have to hurt. That partnership didn't require submission. That strength could be gentle, and kindness could be powerful. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony, not in a church where Clara had memories of standing in a wedding dress she'd never worn, but in a beautiful garden, surrounded by people who'd supported both their individual journeys and their journey together. Clara walked herself down the aisle, needing no one to give her away, because she'd never belonged to anyone but herself. She wore a simple white dress that she'd designed herself, comfortable and elegant and perfectly suited to who she was. When she reached Ethan, he was crying. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're perfect," she replied. Their vows were honest and real. Clara promised to choose Ethan every day, freely and completely. Ethan promised to honor Clara's independence while building a life together. They promised to support each other's dreams and comfort each other's fears. They promised to be partners in every sense of the word, equals building something meaningful together. When they kissed, Clara felt something she'd never felt in her previous marriage: peace, joy, the certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly who she was supposed to be with, not because she needed saving, but because she'd chosen this, all of it, her freedom, her career, her healing, her love. Every single piece of her life was built by her own choices and her own strength. Ethan had witnessed it and supported it, but Clara had done the building. And that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, I need you to hear something important. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be respected. You deserve a life without fear. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Have you or someone you love ever found the courage to leave a dangerous situation? Have you ever had someone see your pain and help you find your strength? Have you ever rebuilt your life after trauma? Share your story if you feel comfortable. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Because stories like Clara's matter. They remind us to pay attention when someone seems afraid. They remind us that real help empowers rather than creates dependency. They remind us that survivors are strong, not broken. They remind us that healing is possible, even from the worst situations. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do that right now. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds you of the power of human resilience. Like this video if Clara's journey inspired you. Share it with someone who needs to know that leaving is possible. Share it with someone who needs to understand how to help without taking away agency. Share it with someone who needs hope, because everyone deserves to know that their worst moment doesn't define their future. Everyone deserves to know that asking for help is brave, not weak. Everyone deserves to know that they can build a life they love after surviving something terrible. Thank you for watching Clara and Ethan's story. Thank you for understanding that this wasn't about a billionaire rescuing a damsel in distress. This was about a woman saving herself with support from someone who saw her strength. This was about empowerment, not dependency. This was about real love that respects and honors rather than controls and diminishes. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. If you need help, reach out. If someone you know needs help, offer support without judgment. If you've survived, know that you're stronger than you realize, and always remember you deserve safety, respect, and love. Not someday, right now, exactly as you are. Until next time.